Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video, and today I'll be diving into every NBA team's worst trade in history. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First, we'll talk about the Golden State Warriors. The worst trade in Warriors history was in 1980 when the Warriors traded away Robert Parrish on their 3rd overall pick to the Celtics for the 1st overall pick and the 13th overall pick. The draft came by, and with the 1st overall pick, the Warriors selected Joe Barry Carroll. Then with the 3rd overall pick, the Celtics selected Kevin McHale. So they traded Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale for Joe Barry Carroll. Next, we have the Lakers. In 1977, the Lakers got Adrian Dantley, a star-studded power forward who was great alongside Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, averaging 26.5 points and 9 rebounds. But despite those great numbers, Lakers opted to trade him for Spencer Haywood in 1979. Adrian Dantley went on to have a Hall of Fame career, making 6 All-Star teams and averaged 30 points for 4 consecutive seasons with the Jazz, while Spencer Haywood was mediocre and suffered a cocaine addiction for most of his career and left the Lakers a year later. Next up are the Celtics. In the 1997 draft, the Celtics selected Chauncey Billups 3rd overall. Then only 8 months later, on February 18, 1998, the Celtics decided to trade Chauncey Billups, Dee Brown, Roy Rogers, and John Thomas to the Raptors for Kenny Anderson, Popeye Jones, and Zan Tabak. They traded the future 5-time All-Star for Kenny Anderson and a chicken sandwich. Chauncey Billups ended up exiting Toronto just to head to the Pistons and led them to a championship in 2004 and winning Finals MVP in the process, while Kenny Anderson was mediocre, averaging around 10 points for the 4 seasons he spent with the Celtics. Next up are the Nets, and this trade is considered by a lot of fans as the worst trade in NBA history. So let me tell you the story. On draft night in 2013, the Nets traded Gerald Wallace, Chris Humphries, Marshawn Brooks, Keith Bogans, Chris Joseph, and 3 unprotected first-round picks for a 36-year-old Paul Pierce, a 37-year-old Kevin Garnett, and a 36-year-old Jason Terry. Now, I think even then, most people knew that the Nets overpaid. 3 unprotected first-round picks for 3 old heads who are probably going to retire 3 years from now? Not worth it. The Nets had great players such as Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, and Brook Lopez, all in their prime. And adding Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett sounded like a championship team. It wasn't. They ended up losing in the second round of the playoffs. On the other hand, the Celtics used the picks to draft Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. With the 3rd one, they packaged it with some players for Kyrie Irving. So the Nets could have had Kyrie Irving, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, but instead, they had a couple of years of washed-up KG, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry. Next, we have the Miami Heat. Now, they've actually been really smart in their trades. You can't say the same about free agency, though. Trading Shaq to the Suns back in 2008 for Shawn Marion was their worst trade in history. Shawn Marion was a mediocre player, while Shaq helped the Suns with interior defense for a couple of years. Next are the Toronto Raptors. In 2004, the Raptors traded Vince Carter to the Nets for Eric Williams, Aaron Williams, Alonzo Mourning, and 2 first-round draft picks. The Raptors traded their best player in history for players who sucked and didn't even want to play in Toronto. I know Vince Carter wanted to leave, but I feel like they could have gotten way more than that for him. Then we have the Dallas Mavericks. The day after Christmas in 1996, the Mavericks ruined the fans' Christmas by trading their star point guard Jason Kidd and other pieces such as Tony Dumas and Lauren Meyer to the Suns for Sam Cassell, Michael Finley, AC Green, and a 2nd-round draft pick in 1998. Jason Kidd continued to be solid in Phoenix as a backup point guard to the legendary Steve Nash. Sam Cassell and Michael Finley had great careers, but the very next season after this trade, Mavs found themselves with an under 286 percentage. Needless to say, it wasn't a good trade, and it took the Mavs a long time to recover from that. Next up, the Hawks. Now this trade is bad. In 1956, the Hawks selected Bill Russell with the 2nd pick. The Hawks decided to trade Bill Russell to the Celtics for Ed McCauley and Cliff Hagan, who was in the military and hasn't even played a single game for the Celtics yet. The trade wasn't that bad for the Hawks since they did make the playoffs for all the seasons in the next 10 years except for 2. But then there's Bill Russell, 11 chips in 13 years. That's all I need to say. Then we have the Milwaukee Bucks. Now they have 2 really bad ones, so I'm just gonna say both of them and you tell me which is worse. Back in 1998, the Bucks drafted Dirk Nowitzki but instantly traded him alongside Pat Garrity for Robert Traylor. Robert Traylor was a journeyman for the next 7 seasons and found no success. On the other hand, Dirk Nowitzki led the Mavs to an NBA championship, became a first ballot Hall of Famer, a perennial All-Star, one of the game's greatest scorers, and the best European player in the history of the league. The other trade was in 1975 when they decided it was a good idea to trade away Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the Lakers alongside Walt Wesley for Elmore Smith, Brian Winters, Junior Bridgman, and Dave Myers. Ever heard of any of those players? Yeah, that's what I thought. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had a very successful career with the Lakers, as the Bucks players practically did nothing. The Memphis Grizzlies are up next. Back in 2001, the Vancouver Grizzlies were desperate for just good players, and when the Pistons offered them a 35-year-old Otis Thurp for a first-round pick in 2003, they couldn't say no. Now that was kind of retarded. Their first-round pick was so much more valuable than Otis Thurp. The first-round pick was lottery protected, but since it was so bad, they decided to make it only number 1 pick protected. So in the lottery, if the Grizzlies pick wasn't number 1, it would go to the Pistons, and the best case scenario happened. It went to the Pistons at number 2. We all know that they drafted Darko Milicic, but I just have that feeling that the Vancouver Grizzlies head office would be smarter than that and actually pick up the red flags. They could have had Dwayne Wade or Carmelo Anthony or Chris Bosh, not 2 distant years of a washed Otis Thorpe. Next we have the Timberwolves. In 1996, they drafted Ray Allen, but immediately traded him for Stephon Marbury, Kevin Garnett's close friend. Now, don't get me wrong, he was great for the 3 seasons he played, averaging 21 points and 9 assists. He left in the 3rd season while Ray Allen became the greatest 3-point shooter of all time, and this guy came along, who the Timberwolves also passed up on twice in the draft. Timberwolves hate 3-point shooters. Then we have the Philadelphia 76ers. In 1986, the Sixers traded their 30-year-old Moses Malone along with Terry Catledge and 2 first-round picks to the Bullets for Cliff Robinson and Jeff Rowland. Moses Malone was in his prime, and they traded him for Cliff Robinson. Cliff Robinson was a great player, but nowhere near all-star status, and Jeff Rowland was already suffering with foot injuries. Jeff Rowland literally played 5 games with the Sixers, then he retired. Moses Malone made 3 all-star appearances there and was spectacular for the Washington Bullets. Next up are the Chicago Bulls. In the 2006 NBA draft, the Bulls selected LaMarcus Aldridge with the 2nd overall pick. They immediately traded him for Tyrese Thomas. He sucked. He had 8 horrendous seasons in the NBA before retiring, averaging 8 points and 4 rebounds, while LaMarcus Aldridge averaged 20 points per game for the 10 years he was a Blazer before leaving to join the Spurs. Then he averaged 15 points per game for the 5 years he played with the Spurs until he retired a bit because of WPW. Then he unretired to join the Nets, but he isn't too good now. Next up are the New York Knicks. In 2013, the Knicks thought that the only reason Bargnani was playing horrendously in his first season with the Raptors is because he just needed a different environment. So the Knicks decided to trade Marcus Camby, Steve Novak, Quentin Richardson, a 2016 first-round pick, and 2014 second-round pick, and a 2017 second-round pick to the Toronto Raptors for Andrea Bargnani. Needless to say, the environment wasn't the reason for Bargnani's bad season. It's because he just wasn't good. He was also getting injured all the time, and his defending was horrendous. As a power forward, at Toronto, he was averaging 13 points per game and 2.7 rebounds per game. In New York, he just got worse. He ended up playing only 61 games for the Knicks before signing to the Nets. The pick ended up being the 9th overall in the NBA draft, which the Raptors selected Jakob Poeltl. They also had Chris Camby on their squad, a good shooter. And next you have the Houston Rockets. In 1983, the Rockets traded Moses Malone to the 76ers for Caldwell Jones and Rodney McRae. They ultimately did nothing. And even crazier, the Rockets traded Moses Malone right after he won the MVP award. He then won it in the next season with the 76ers. Then we have the Phoenix Suns. For the 2 years the Suns had, Gail Goodrich was an outstanding point guard. Him and Nick Van Arsdale combined for an amazing backcourt. They led an awful Suns team to a near upset against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals in 1969 season. In 1970, the Suns wanted a center to compete with the other dominant centers in the league, and the Lakers have been eyeing Gail Goodrich since the Western Conference Finals, so they decided to trade Gail Goodrich, who averaged 23 points and 5 assists per game, for Mel Count, a center who averaged 10 points and 7 rebounds. Mel Count averaged 8 points and 5 rebounds with the Suns for the 2 seasons he played, while Gail Goodrich had a Hall of Fame career with the Lakers, winning the chip, having 4 All-Star selections and 3 as a starter, and was their star point guard for the most of the 70s. The Cavs are up next. Back in the 1980 season, the Cavs traded their 1982 first-rounder and G. Butch Lee to the Lakers for Don Ford and the Lakers' first-round pick in 1980. Now, the 1982 season comes around, and boom, the Cavs go 15-67, and the pick they traded to the Lakers is now the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. The Lakers selected James Worthy. James Worthy pans out to have a Hall of Fame career and becomes one of the greatest Lakers to ever grace the basketball court, forming a dynasty with Magic and Kareem, making the Showtime Lakers. He became a 7-time All-Star and averaged 17 points per game for his whole career, while Don Ford did nothing for the Cavs. Next, we have the Nuggets. Now, Jazz fans have a lot to thank the Nuggets for. In the 2013 draft, the Nuggets drafted Rudy Gobert, but then they decided to trade him for a second-round pick and cash consideration. The second-round pick was Eric Green, who played 52 games in the NBA and averaged 3.4 points per game, while Rudy Gobert won DPOY back-to-back and was a dominant force with Donovan Mitchell. Now, talking about Donovan Mitchell, in the 2017 NBA draft, the Nuggets drafted Donovan Mitchell with the 13th overall pick and traded him again to the Jazz for Trey Lyles and the 24th overall pick, which was Tyler Lydon. Ouch. Imagine the trio of Gobert, Jokic, and Donovan Mitchell. We just looked at the successful moves by the Jazz. Now let's look at the not successful moves. After Gail Goodrich's successful stint with the Lakers, he wanted out, and the Jazz wanted him, so it was a perfect match. The Jazz traded Kenny Carr Freeman Williams, Sam Worthing, and their 1979 first-round draft pick. The Lakers sent back Gail Goodrich, S.E. Evans, and Jack Giffen. They got their man, but they were a very bad team in their 4-year existence. So they had to have known that pick would have been something. It was. It was Magic Johnson. They traded Magic Johnson and other valuable pieces for a 36-year-old Gail Goodrich. Next are the Pelicans. In 2005, the Pelicans traded Baron Davis, who averaged 16 points per game and was injury-prone. They traded him for Speedy Claxton and Dale Davis from the Warriors. Well, when he was at the Warriors, he became a 2-time All-Star, the Warriors' star point guard, and a 21 points per game scorer, while Speedy Claxton and Dale Davis' tenure at the Pelicans was so uneventful that it's not even worth mentioning. Next are the Thunder, and this one is bad. In the 2012 season, this trade went down. The Rockets received James Harden, Daquan Cook, and Lazar Hayward, while the Thunder received Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and 3 future picks. Remember, Harden was off winning 6th Man of the Year as a 23-year-old averaging 17 points. The Thunder could have kept him, but they kept trying to lowball him, so he just gave up and requested a trade. Nice one, OKC. Harden went on to win MVP and leading a lackluster Rockets to the Western Conference Finals twice. Kevin Martin and Jeremy Lamb had no impact whatsoever to the Thunder, and now OKC fans are left to wonder how much chips they would have won with Harden. Now we have the Charlotte Hornets. In the 1996 draft, the Hornets drafted Kobe Bryant with the 13th overall pick and immediately traded him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. Vlade Divac played a couple of seasons with the Hornets, then left in free agency to go to the Kings, while Kobe became one of the greatest NBA players of all times. And in 2014, he tweeted this. Kobe won 5 championships and even three-peated in 2002. He won the MVP award twice and he made 18 All-Star teams. He also dropped 81 points on the Raptors one time. What a career that he had. Next up are the San Antonio Spurs. In the 17-18 season, the Spurs were the 7th seed and casually made it to the playoffs every year, up until they decided to trade Kawhi Leonard for DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl and a first-round pick. Sure, Kawhi wanted to leave the Spurs, but they had way better offers from both teams in LA. But since the Spurs were desperate not to send their star player to LA, they decided to trade him to the Raptors. Kawhi found immediate success with the Raptors, winning the NBA championship, while the Spurs remain in a rebuild to this day and have lost DeMar DeRozan in the process. Kawhi still ended up playing in LA though. Next up are the Pistons. Now it can't get much worse than this. The Pistons are a competitive team with great players and make a deep playoff run every year. Oh, not these Pistons. The ones in the 2000s era. Well, up until 2008, when the Detroit Pistons traded 2004 Finals MVP Chauncey Billups, Antonio McDyess, and Sheikh Sam to the Denver Nuggets for Allen Iverson. Antonio McDyess was a fan favorite due to his grittiness in Detroit, and Chauncey Billups is Chauncey Billups. They traded that away for a washed 33-year-old Allen Iverson, who played one underwhelming season for them. While Chauncey Billups and Anthony McDyess proceeded to continue playing great in Denver, with Chauncey Billups averaging 17.9 points, then in the next season averaging 19.5, becoming an unstoppable force alongside Carmelo for the next 2 years. Iverson averaged 17.4 points, then got injured and left the season after that. Now we have the Orlando Magic. On June 23, 2016, the Magic traded Ersan Ilyasova, Victor Oladipo, and Domantas Sabonis to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Serge Ibaka. Victor Oladipo ended up becoming a 2-time All-Star but became extremely injury-prone, but I think he'll make a comeback with the Heat next season. They also traded Domantas Sabonis, who is now one of the best power forwards in the NBA. Serge Ibaka played 1 season with the Magic, averaging 15 points and 9 rebounds, then left the next season to go to the Raptors and win the championship. They traded an all-star and a dominant power forward for 1 good year of Serge Ibaka. Next up are the Washington Wizards. On August 11, 1999, Ben Wallace was traded by the Washington Wizards with Terry Davis, Tim Legler, and Jeff McInnes to the Orlando Magic for Isaac Austin. Do you know who he is? Yeah, neither do I. Well, Ben Wallace arguably became the greatest Piston of all time. Sorry, Isaiah Thomas, winning the championship with the Pistons in 2004. And fun fact, Rip Hamilton and Rasheed Wallace were also traded away by the Wizards. They all ended up being on the same team in 2004. Detroit needs to be thankful for Washington. Now we have the Trailblazers, and again, for the 3rd time in this video, Moses Malone has been the player each team has given away. Anyways, back in the 1976 draft, the Blazers drafted Moses Malone, but ultimately decided to trade him because him and their first option in the draft, Morris Lucas, skill sets did not go well together. So they traded him to the Buffalo Braves. Morris Lucas did help the Blazers win the chip the following year, but he's no Moses Malone, who won 3 MVPs, was a 12-time All-Star, and averaged over 20 points per game across his 22-year career. The Pacers are up next. The Pacers could have had Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Back in 1981, the Pacers traded away their 1984 first-round pick to the Blazers for Tom Owens. That pick ended up to be the second overall pick in the NBA draft, which they used to select Sam Bowie. Now, the Pacers were good in the center position, so they wouldn't have selected Sam Bowie, and they were lacking in the guard position, so they would have drafted Michael Jordan. But they wanted Tom Owens. Finally, the Sacramento Kings. In the 2013-14 season, the Kings had a promising lineup which consisted of Isaiah Thomas, their point guard, who averaged 20.3 points per game and 6.3 assists per game, who made a scary duo with prime DeMarcus Cousins and a Tyreke Evans who was just 3 years removed from winning the Rookie of the Year award. Then they blew it all up because they didn't want to pay Isaiah Thomas, so they made a sign-and-trade deal to send him to Phoenix, who paid him $28 million, and the Kings got a $7 million trade exception. I have no idea what that is. He ended up leaving the Suns, joining the Celtics, and averaged a normal 28.9 points per game and became an MVP candidate. That's it for the episode. I'm sorry that this took a long time to upload, but you can clearly see why this took a lot of research. But it was worth it because I learned a lot, and I hope you guys learned a lot.